Welcome, everyone, to episode number 86 of the Single Malt Strategy Podcast. I am Eric Tortuga. I don't know what I'm going to be called today, but I'm joined by my trusty, really the host of this, but we'll call him the co-host, the historical gamer. Matt, how are you?
I'm doing great, but I'm definitely not the host of this. I definitely have played plenty of games in this topic, but I consider myself a casual, just sort of hanging on. You know, I'm a fly on the wall.
I've given this some thought. I think we can go ahead and spoil the topic. It's going to be tower defense. We're going to talk about tower defense games. People already saw it on the episode when they clicked, right? So that's the topic. For this special topic, which is a little more niche, we have brought in, I'm going to go ahead and call these guys two genre experts. We dug far and wide for two tower defense aficionados, and we are joined by Lethrington. How are you doing, Leth?
Yes, hello. I'm here from the bottom of the kiddie pool that he dug to.
I don't know about the bottom of the kiddie pool, but this is your first time on the show, right?
Yeah, it is. Thanks for having me.
Well, welcome.
I've known Leth for a very long time, just through my YouTube channel. I think that he and I would probably have a good overlap for most genres. We seem to play a lot of the same games, but it was good to see that he's also a big tower defense fan.
Someone's got to man the walls. Ba-dum.
Oh, brother. We're also joined today with a second-time podcaster with the Single Malt Strategy. I think you've been on this once before. Blxz from way down under.
Glad to be back, and I'm another filthy casual that you've dug up to talk about this topic, because I don't think you could find anyone by the sounds of it if you're getting me back.
Well, we'll start off today as we normally do, but with an abbreviated section on what have you been playing lately. I can just tell you that what I've been playing lately, I'll start with myself, selfishly. I've been playing a lot of tower defense games, which might have been part of the catalyst for this, but we also have like two, I guess almost three recent releases in this area that have kind of driven piqued my interest, you could say. I played Axon Tower Defense. I've played Cataclysmo, which is just recently released into early access, and I played Diplomacy is Not an Option. And other than that, I'm still playing that game from our previous podcast, Heads Will Roll, and that's probably the extent of what I'm playing in depth. Oh, I guess a little bit of Stationeers. So the first three are tower defense games. Heads Will Roll. People who have listened to the podcast already know about that. That's the RPG. And then this last one, Stationeers, is a really cool game where it's like a survival game, but without combat. You're dropped in as like an astronaut onto a planet, and you construct your own habitat. It's pretty involved, but it's a lot of fun. Let's jump over to Blxz next. What have you been playing, Mr. Down Under?
I've actually not touched a lot of tower defense for a little while. I'm more of a purist when it comes to tower defense. A lot of these newfangled things don't quite do it for me. But what I've been doing lately has been a bit of Red Dead Redemption 2. I'm finally getting through that. Bit of Death Stranding. I like my walking simulator. And Flight Sim, of all things. Microsoft Flight Sim. I've been flying around the world with a couple of Australian people in the Baby Duke. Other than that, I don't have a lot of time to myself at the moment. We're in the middle of truffle season, so I don't play a huge amount of games right now. I'm mostly scrabbling in the dirt.
I always forget about truffle season.
For the uninitiated, that counts as farming, right?
Yeah, agricultural, that kind of stuff. It's a great big orchard, so I get to muck around in the dirt and the mud and the rain and the hail. And it's a wintertime crop, so it's not traditional farming how you picture it.
THG, what have you been up to?
Not a ton. I did just resume my War in the Pacific series after a little bit of a hiatus, so that's sort of always ongoing. I've been playing Strategic Command World War II War in the Pacific, which I enjoy, but is definitely not a substitute for any serious sim of the era. It just, as much as I think the land combat in that game is fine, but the naval combat is just, I'm in the midst of a Central Pacific battle that is just attriting the Japanese over like 2 months, and it's like, this is not, we've talked about this.
I was going to say, ad nauseum.
And then, a little bit of casual stuff. I've been playing, I enjoy MLB The Show, so I've been playing my pitcher character in that, and I just started up College Football 25, which I wanted to play my first game. I've done a little bit of scouting and stuff in my Dynasty, and I started to play the first game today, and then my daughter, who was coloring at the table, started yelling at me, wondering why, if the TV was on, why it wasn't Gabby's Dollhouse, and then I had to stop.
Yeah.
Dad life.
Well, that only leaves Lethrington. I'm just gonna guess, Leth. Have you played a lot of stuff lately? I just feel like you're touching all the tons of games at all times.
I get very fatigued if I play one game too long, so I regularly switch between several different games throughout a week. Otherwise, I get really burnt out. I have been doing a lot of tower defense, which The main one of which I'll save for now because we're probably going to get way into that later. But I've also been revisiting some older stuff. Pillars of Eternity, which is a kind of CRPG thing that came out as sort of, it was one of the early, we're getting back to CRPGs. Haven't played it in a long time, still really good. And then Fallout London, which has just come out. Been dipping my toes into that.
I don't know if they're still called this, but basically the total conversion mod for Fallout 4.
Yeah, absolutely. It's total conversion. And it's using the same, you'll find the same assets everywhere, but it's a totally different setting, fully voice acted. A lot of work has gone into it. And unlike the previous Fallout 4 total conversion that was in the news, this one doesn't seem to be as problematic as that one was. So, great.
I don't know the backstory about that. Is it worth it?
There was it was a big mod that was really hyped up, and then came out, and there was a bunch of issues about it, most of which I don't think are something I even want to talk about. But
no, you're not saying Fallout London. You're saying the other.
No, the previous one. Yeah, the previous overhaul.
So so Fallout London worth taking a look at?
I think so. I would give it a few weeks. They have some crashes and bugs that are happening right now, but it's only a few things which they're trying to get patched. So I would give it a bit. I think it's definitely worth taking a look. It's a lot of effort has gone into this.
Awesome. Topical too with the Amazon TV series.
Yeah.
Have any of you watched that, by the way? Not to get us way off topic.
Yeah, I watched it.
I actually haven't, but my brother and my friends have all been talking up its praises, so I need to get around to it eventually.
Yeah, I thought it was very entertaining.
Supposed to be pretty good. I missed a lot of it. I saw a few bits of the first episode and then sort of checked out, signed out. It's not quite my kind of thing, but I reckon a lot of people would be into it.
Yeah, I've basically heard rave reviews, but I don't watch a lot of TV shows to begin with, but...
yeah, same here.
But yeah.
No, that's the problem, though. If you hear rave reviews, then it's already poison for you. I went in with kind of this very... this is going to be garbage. And then my expectations were, well, they were met and then some, because it wasn't totally garbage. So that's the... Let me just tell you guys it's totally garbage, and then go in with those kind of expectations. That's the best way of doing it.
I mean, I did enjoy The Last of Us, which I knew had great reviews, too, going in, so... I thought that was pretty good. I'm not a huge, I haven't played the second one in that series. I'm also not a huge Fallout fan. I played a little bit of 4. I don't think I have any history with any of the other Fallout games, so...
Yeah, I never even bought 4. I played 3, never even played New Vegas. So I played 1, 2, 3, and that was sort of it. So I don't think I've touched Fallout for, a decade and a half.
Well, anyway, we can probably move on to our topic of tower defense. And I know you are the most qualified person to discuss this, Tortuga, so why don't you...
Well, I don't know about most qualified. We have probably a 3-way thumb wrestling match with Leth and Blxz and myself, but I did want to kind of break this into 2 segments because I think that you talk about tower defense things. Okay, one of the first things I guess we can talk about is even how tower defense came to be. I think it's even hard to define what it is as a topic because when I was kind of reminiscing about my childhood days, I remember playing Warcraft 2. It's probably the first game where I played it in a pretty tower defense. Actually, that's not true. It was probably as early as Dune 2, where you would just set up base defenses, and you could probably play almost any real-time strategy game. I mean, a lot of them offer base defenses, and you can play it as a tower defense game. You can play it where you just wait for the enemy to come, wear themselves out, and then amass a massive force that's completely unkillable, and then go take out the enemy. And that's kind of the way I played Warcraft, the original game. And that's the way I played Dune 2. I mean, a lot of the games.
That's certainly how I played Command & Conquer.
I feel like the roots of tower defense is basically just in people who are turtles.
Yeah, turtles. Yes, exactly. Yep. I was thinking it.
If you're a turtle like me, then yeah, you basically have a dedicated game now that comes out of this where you do nothing but turtle as the game mechanic itself. You don't even have to bother with the offensive part because that was just something where it was already a foregone conclusion. Your army would attack and win. The moment you set out from your base, you only set out from your base when you were unstoppable. So now they've just erased that part and they made a tower defense.
Turtling is got to be every RTS gamer for their first couple games they ever played. What do we do? We hide behind our little walls and towers because the game's scary and we don't know how to handle the AI. But we do know how to build structures. One of the first things that tutorials always teach us, so Age of Empires, even the first one, tower defense definitely came out of that because, again, people were already really into just building their little defenses and hiding in the corner, right? I mean, I think we've all done that at some point.
Yeah, exactly. I even looked for games like that. And perfect example, Age of Empires, where I always wanted a game where you could just build defenses and build up like your big walls and then watch if the enemy could overcome it. In fact, I remember when I would make custom scenarios, almost always it was basically a tower defense thing where I would put 1,000,000 units for the AI, and I would just build up my defenses and I would just let them attack and see if I could hold. I don't know, it probably harkens back to my childhood images of the defense at Minas Tirith from Lord of the Rings and stuff like that.
I was going to say, for me, Helm's Deep. Yeah, that was a big inspiration.
So those kind of things just inspired my tower defense bug. And maybe we can talk about first the real-time strategy. I mean, we already are. We're deep into it. And then actually hold off on what I think are the pure tower defense games that like come from that. Sorry. Here, this is a question I had when thinking about this. Would you consider Lords of the Realm a tower defense?
Ooh, I didn't even think about Lords of the Realm.
Oh, it's a big one. How do you define the genre?
It's got like, okay, so my idea of the real-time strategy version of a tower defense is you have your resource gathering and then you have your actual defense scene. And it has to be that the resource gathering enables you to build up a better defense. And I'm kind of on the fence about it because these are all games, by the way, that probably are going to have mobile units. But yeah, I thought about Lords of the Realm, and maybe that was another game that I also enjoyed, just building up massive defenses. And it's not quite the same, though, because it's not customizable. It's just like pick this castle, pick that castle.
But, again, that's another one of those games where if you actually know how to play Lords of the Realm, you almost never will defend because, you're always sieging down the AI castles. But when you're young and you're playing Lords of the Realm and you don't know what you're doing, you very quickly learn about defensive battles, right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Well, when I was young and didn't know what I was doing.
You think Stronghold, the original Stronghold, would probably be the original sort of catalyst for when defensive battles were the main thing they're going for? Because a lot of games, fighting defensively is really a losing proposition. But tower defense is all about fighting defensively. So do you think, would you call Stronghold, because that was 2001, I think, would you call that the beginning of proper tower defense, like defense as a gameplay point?
I would. I mean, that's what I had in my notes as the first dedicated tower defense game, with a question mark about Lords of the Realm. But yeah, probably Stronghold for me. Now, Tishi, you said that you actually played Stronghold, so
I played it a lot, and I guess I never thought of it as a tower defense. Like, it obviously is, but to me, I mean, I played more of the campaign stuff, which had elements of offensive warfare too, where you'd be given like a set number of units and then you'd have to go.
Oh, the siege battles. Ugh.
It was less siege. It was more of like figure out how to unlock the puzzle. There's almost like a puzzle game element in that game when you're fighting offensively, because you can fight offensive battles, but it's all determined on the map, right? It is either an offensive battle, in which case it's kind of you being the anti-tower defense, or it's tower defense where you have to fix up this castle before the rats troops, or whatever the bad guys troops.
Yeah, the rat.
And I played a little bit of Stronghold HD when they remastered it a couple of years ago, and I played Stronghold, was it 5? The one, I think that was in China that just came out recently.
Yeah.
It didn't capture the same magic to me. Like, Stronghold sort of exists in this period of, was it middle school or high school? Must have been...
Would have been high school, wouldn't you? How old are you?
Maybe I was a freshman in high school when it came out. And this was like back before I had a good gaming PC, but my neighbor had one. So like when I got Sid Meier's Gettysburg, I would bring it over to his house and we'd play it, into the wee hours of the morning. And I got Stronghold and we did the same thing. So like I played these games at other people's houses. But I guess, traditionally, I suppose Stronghold is a tower defense, but again, it has elements that I wouldn't necessarily... To me, tower defense, and I know this isn't fair, and I know we're going to talk about mostly PC games here, but to me, tower defense is almost like I associate with the iPhone or with the Android phone, because there's so many garbage tower defense games on mobile that's kind of like poisoned my mind on what tower defense is.
Oh yeah, we'll get into that, because that's a whole...
Yeah,
that's a whole can of worms.
The old Congregate days back in the day, the Congregate sort of online stuff, that's where tower defense, I think, really started to shine. Those sort of the purist ones, the initial kind of like your not Dungeon Defenders, your Kingdom Rush style stuff.
That was like Flash games, wasn't it?
Yeah, like they were all Flash games and stuff like that. They were huge back in...
Kind of the predecessor to the mobile games that now infest everything.
Yeah, the early internet.
Yeah.
Did the original Pharaoh have battles in it?
Pharaoh, the city builder.
Because Caesar 3 did. And I'm wondering how much of... Because Caesar 3 obviously predates Stronghold, right? So I'm wondering how much of...
Yeah, I wouldn't call that a tower defense game. No, there are towers and you do defend.
Right. No. I'm not suggesting that Caesar is a tower defense.
But it has the elements, yes.
Right. And that's what I'm wondering is like, did that, the desire to have a city builder where you would have combat elements, is that where tower defense came out of, right? Like, because most of the early tower defense games, at least Stronghold, have very strong city building elements in them as well.
If you look at mods and stuff for, say, StarCraft or something like that, or Warcraft, a lot of them were actually taking out the city part, and that was really what defined the tower defense part. Was, I think, it's only Stronghold and sort of the more modern ones like They Are Billions and whatnot are sort of bringing that city aspect back into it. But for a long time, defining tower defense was without a city. You weren't building a city at all.
Yeah, the eco part is, so in a way, it was... The modern games all have the big economy focus for tower defense, and I think that's kind of a merging of the two concepts of the games like Stronghold, which weren't really a tower defense game, but they had similar elements, and then what I would really call the original tower defense scene, which were custom maps people were making in Age of Empires, the old RTS games, where someone would just make a maze, and then they'd give you some builder units, and they'd transfer that custom game to people through email or whatever, and you would just go and try and build towers to stop the enemies from getting to the end.
RTS games, and I didn't play StarCraft, but I did play a lot of Command and Conquer Red Alert. So like Command and Conquer Red Alert obviously has very strong, it's an RTS, but in the base building mechanics, there's definitely, and in a lot of the missions, there's definitely a feeling of building a base up that can survive waves of enemy. Obviously, it does have the RTS element of now you got to go hunt down the enemy in most cases and destroy their base. But there's definitely this build up your city, if you will. The difference to me between like something like that and something like Stronghold is like Stronghold sort of has this economic element of if you don't build a good enough town, people will leave, right? Like there's this public happiness element of it where to get more peasants to come to your town to run the bakeries or, man the walls as soldiers, you've got to have a happy populace. So that requires you to kind of city build as well as build up your defenses. Whereas something like Command and Conquer is literally just farm money, print soldiers, build buildings. Every single building is military oriented. There is no civilian economy. And to me, that's kind of where I delineate, in my head anyway, tower defense as sort of having a civilian aspect to it as opposed to just more RTS-y.
I got another wrench to throw in the conversation. That's a game that you could play as definitely was meant to be played as a normal RTS, but you could actually win in a tower defense mode, and that is Total Annihilation. You could, in theory, just build buildings, no offensive units, and your buildings could defeat the enemy buildings. Which is one way I used to play, is by building up those like super railguns, and they're like map-wide attacks. So you could just win the game turtling. I don't know, that's probably not the most popular way of playing and probably can't be done competitively, but against the AI, it was a viable way. The pure tower defense.
A little bit like Creeper World. It's a sort of I guess you'd call that tower defense, but it's you're creeping forward against the creeper, which is creeping to you, building your buildings and slowly taking map control.
Yeah, you're actually using your defenses offensively. So it's tower defense, but your towers are also what you're using to attack the enemy at the same time.
Correct, yeah. So you have to take map control, but at the same, it's a race against time. There's little nodules around the map, nodes, that are actually releasing like layers of this liquid stuff. The creeper, they call it, I suppose. And you actually blow that shit up to take back the land, which gives you more economy, more money to build more towers faster.
I would definitely call that a tower defense game, and almost a pure tower defense game, really. It is. It's got the economy, and then it's got the towers, basically. That's it, right?
Well, effectively, yeah. You actually offensive towers rather than defensive towers. You'd love it, Tortuga. You could turtle forever.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think it's perfect. Anything where you're building towers to advance, like even to advance your defenses, in this case, offensively. Yeah, I don't know. I'd still call it a very pure tower defense game.
With this whole conversation about the RTS thing, PhD actually had a point that I want to come back to, which is he was talking about these games like Stronghold, where it's all about your economy, right? So I was thinking, with a traditional tower defense, which we're still going to get into, you usually have lives or score where, like, if something gets through your defenses, After a certain number of them get through, you lose, right? Well, the economy in a game like Stronghold's kind of similar when you think about it, because you have to build your defenses to actually protect your economy, right? Because if an enemy gets through, they're going to wreak havoc on your apple orchards or whatever, which means that your people are going to start starving, which means your economy crashes, and you can get caught into a death spiral by that. So there's a lot of similarity, actually, when you think about these more, especially these more modern titles that have the economy aspect compared to a traditional life point system. Because in practice, it's the same thing. If enough enemies get through, you're going to lose just because of the rest of the mechanics at play. It doesn't even have to, like, destroy your kill your king. If you lose enough of your economy, you're going to lose no matter what.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think we've danced around it enough. Maybe we should just talk a little bit about pure tower defense, because
scandalous. Oh.
The flow I have in my head for how things progressed in time, and you guys can feel free to disagree with this, is that we had these games which had the tower defense elements, Stronghold being the only one that was probably like a really good pure tower defense game. And then at some point people were like, well, look at it, we can make a very simplified version of a game if we just get rid of everything else. And also, guess what, that simplified now pure tower defense game can be played on the web or on the mobile devices because it's so simple. And I don't know which one the first was that came about that was only tower defense and like the pure tower defense way we all think about it. Bloons maybe? I don't know. I really don't.
You couldn't name them. They'd be thick on the ground. There were a dozen coming out a week back in the old Congregate, those sites and whatnot. But Bloons and Kingdom Rush, I think, was another one, which is they made a more modern version of it. But back in the day, it was something very similar. You place down a tower and you put out like little soldiers that walk onto the track and try and block them while the other towers would shoot. But Bloons is probably the most well-known modern version because I think they're up to 6 now. They have number 7 on the way shortly.
In my view of things, the pure tower defense games are very paired with this simplified gameplay that also exists. I mean, it's meant even for like mobile devices. And I myself played Kingdom Rush on my phone. So that's actually the only way I've played those really pure ones until maybe Defense Grid: The Awakening. It must have been the first PC title that I played.
2008, I think that was.
You and I both played that one, but why don't I let you talk about it?
Defense Grid 1, and there was a second one. I can't remember the subtitle for that one. But Defense Grid 1, I think, was fantastic. 2008 or 2009 maybe it came out. Fairly long time ago, but it was all about having, these individual towers you'd summon on the spot and you could upgrade and whatnot, but it was all about identifying what you were going to be fighting. So each tower was balanced for X amount of time that something would be within the range. And so by placing a really good tower in a bad spot, you could completely ruin and throw it out. Now they're having enemies with sort of certain like resistances to whatnot. So the fire tower would be fantastic at huge swarms of slower enemies. But if they moved beyond that range, you needed to have something else to back it up. You couldn't just keep piling fire on top. So it was a fantastic game for bringing in like strategy and actually building up layered defenses, which I don't think a lot of games had before that.
Was it the first game? It's the only one that I've experienced like this, so I don't know. I mean, it's probably not original, but at least it was original to me. This idea that the enemies had an entrance point, which was also the exit point, because the objective for them was to go and take one of your cores, steal it, and then they would return on the same... I don't know if... Was it always the same path? But anyways, they'd go out...
Not always.
Okay. Well, they'd go and they'd take a core from your central point, and then if they got that far, you could still, by killing them, your core would slowly drift back. So, you could save it, but if they took it off the map, that was really how you lost. The
thing with the cores, though, is Defense Grid did an interesting thing where it incentivized not building as much as you could. So your cores gave you like interest payments, and if you had all 20 cores remaining there, you gained 100% of the interest. Every core that was removed, whether it was drifting or whether it was removed from the map permanently, every time it was outside of that home base, you would lose 5% all the way down to 0% of your interest income. So you could have a guess, like, do I need to build up as much, or do I save $1,000 or whatever and allow myself to gain heaps of interest? But if the guys come through and take all your cores, you may as well have spent the money because you're actually not gaining any interest. So I had an interesting sort of, you have to weigh up the pros and cons of just ultimately defending or trying to play the long game.
It's perfect for a min-max type person like myself, where you're really straddling the very edge of how much you can eke out I also want to say the voice acting in that game was fantastic. The person who played the AI core person, I think his voice acting, it would actually, I don't know how much it was supposed to be an emotional game, but I actually became emotionally involved in the story because of his fantastic voice acting. Leth, I don't know, did you play that one at all?
So I did play Defense Grid, both one and the one that won't be named.
Good.
So that's one thing I was actually going to ask. Did you guys, was your first experience on PC or did you play it on console?
PC.
Oh, console. Wait, hold on, stop. Sorry, I'm a historical gamer. Can we find a replacement for Lethrington? He's bringing up console in our pure PC.
Well, it's relevant.
Well, speaking of console, I mean, I feel like, I was just thinking through, you guys are going through all these games, and I'm just like, how have we not mentioned Missile Command?
Ooh.
Is that the Atari?
It started on the Atari, but I played it on the Game Boy.
Oh, okay.
I don't know that it would fall under like our definition of tower defense because there's no real placing of stuff, right? Like it's a wave defense game more than anything.
Yeah, we might as well talk about.
But that is relevant to saying like an ancestor.
Hey, Wikipedia claims it's a precursor, so.
Wikipedia is never wrong.
I mean, I'm just saying, I'm just trying to throw a wrench in things.
Yeah, so if I remember, this is the game where there was like vines creeping down or whatever they were, and you shoot them, right?
Not vines, they're ballistic missiles, and some of them break into, multiple independently targeted tracks. I think you've got like 6 or 7 cities you've got to defend. You're basically commanding an ABM system, trying to shoot them down as they come in.
Okay, yeah, I would say that's not a tower defense game, but that's my opinion at least.
Just trying to throw something out there.
It would have been the original from Atari, definitely, but
I mean, that's console. I'm just, I played it on the Game Boy. That's console.
So then, you were saying the Defense Grid came out on console. First of all, I'm surprised. I'm actually happily surprised that the game was popular enough to warrant an appearance on console.
Yeah, you got it on Xbox Arcade for Xbox 360. And that was kind of crazy at the time, playing a tower defense on console.
Was it successful there, or do you know anything about it?
Yeah, it was. That's why it ended up getting a PC release, because it sold well.
Oh, no way. I didn't realize it was console first.
Yeah, at least as far as I'm aware, because I don't even think Steam was that popular at the time. Because I'm trying to think of the time release on that. Even if it was out on PC, I don't think anyone played it around then, because at first it was kind of a sleeper game. I don't think anyone really knew about it at first. But it got really popular. Yeah, I remember even my older brother was like, oh man, do you see there's a tower defense game on console?
Also, why are we bemoaning console? My what have you been playing lately had 2 sports games that I've been playing on my PS5.
I know. The snobbery from the officer quarters over there.
Railroad Tycoon 2 was one of my favorite games of all time. Played that on PlayStation. Just saying.
What about the more sort of like 3D ones? Like the console stuff really took off, I think, once you got things like Dungeon Defenders and Sanctum. And I don't know if Orcs Must Die was on console or not, but those were a lot more sort of the whole sort of 3D run around in first person or third person and build up your tower defense that way. Do they count, I suppose?
Yeah, they're absolutely tower defense games.
I have those as tower defense. In fact, I called those first-person shooter horde mechanics because I also included in that 7 Days to Die. Now, we kind of joked about this before beginning this podcast. Is 7 Days to Die, does it really qualify? I don't know. It does to me because it seems very similar where you're building up a defense. But I don't know, man. Might be pushing it to call it that.
I think it falls into a similar gray area as like when we were talking about like games like Stronghold, right? Where they have it has a lot of the elements that you could argue it. But it is kind of like, people would debate us on it.
You could play it I think you can play it not as a tower defense game, which maybe which might make it not a tower defense game, so. But yeah, Orcs Must Die.
I don't want to throw a wrench into everything, but while we're talking about what is or isn't a tower defense game, I know when you guys were talking about games you wanted to talk about before this podcast, I was kind of wondering, what about Frostpunk?
I would not call it a tower defense.
It's tower defense if the environment is the enemy.
Hmm.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a tower in the center, and that's...
I think you could make more of an argument that's more of a survival game, right?
Yeah, but the elements of survival... I don't know. To me...
I mean, is bungee jumping a tower defense game? Because there is a tower involved.
Yeah, I think maybe football games. American football is kind of
Yeah,
tower defense too.
Yeah, you got your towers at the
defending
front,
against the
those
other
big
team,
forwards.
right?
They're towers of people.
So you're taking this to an absurdist degree, but I do think they're, like, in the case of Frostpunk, it is similar in the sense of Stronghold, where you have to build up your city so that people are happy enough and that you have the resources and the defenses against the environment, before to be able to weather the storm that's coming.
Where are the towers?
And sure, they're not individual dudes with spears, but it's not, does a tower defense have to have a physical tower to be a tower defense?
Yes. Yeah, I'm a purist.
I think you're stretching this so much. You could probably draw analogies between tower defense games and Frostpunk, but if you were to poll 100 people, I think at least 99 of them would say it's not a tower defense game. And I don't even think that most people probably wouldn't even say it has tower defense elements.
And this is considering tower defense is already a very broad genre.
Yeah, I mean, Wikipedia doesn't mention tower defense at all about Stronghold.
Right, that's what I was saying. We're already stretching what the classical definition of a tower defense game would be, just even games like that. So I see where you're coming from, though, in the sense that, you're defending against the environment. But I would actually say, yes, I think you actually said it correctly when I think a tower defense does need a kind of physical enemy as a threat. It could be gray goo, but it needs to be something that you're actively combating against, and usually it's going to be with waves of some kind, right? Just a nebulous constant threat would be a lot harder to balance a defense around, right? Like, I think Frostpunk is more focused on building your economy within a limited scope because of the environment rather than you defending against it. You only got the one generator, and then you got your little hubs. I'm not building like a network of generators to hold back the wall of snow that's coming, like a physical barrier of ice descending.
Okay. Just playing devil's advocate over here.
You mentioned Stronghold is not really one, but I think retrospectively, when we look at it, we do need to lump it in as a tower defense, because you look at something like They Are Billions, Diplomacy is Not an Option, even Thronefall to an extent, are sort of Stronghold-esque tower defense games.
I would vote strongly in favor of Stronghold being considered a tower defense game.
I suspect the reason it's not, and it's the thing that nobody thinks about with the game, but I would suspect the reason they don't classify it as that is just because there are battles where you're on the offensive. And that's usually not...
Probably.
In like a traditional tower defense, usually it's build your defenses up, survive waves of enemy. It's less like, okay, now in this mission, figure out how to crack the enemy walls, right? And that's where it becomes a bit more RTS-y.
Yeah, maybe. I don't want to I was kind of trying to go chronologically through games, but to jump all the way forward to Cataclysmo, I mean, I think I would call Cataclysmo a tower defense game, but it suffers from the same thing. There are missions where you just are moving troops.
I mean, it has no...
Did anyone here play Castle Story? Sorry to cut you off there, Leth.
Yes.
I unfortunately am a Kickstarter original backer for Castle Story.
Oh, my condolences to that one there, Leth. That was
Yeah, that
was a choice you made.
Lost money. That's what it is. Money in a fire. That was the first game I ever backed.
Oh, I have that under... I don't have a lot of games like that on my Steam list, but it is under Ignore when I...
Yeah, there's a good reason, yeah.
A bit unfortunate, that one.
But it looked okay. I mean, was it... At the final state it got to, was it...
What has become a classic problem, which is that they got way more money than they needed. They got over ambitious then, of course, because they suddenly had a bunch of money, and they lost their sense of scope, and they ended up wasting all the money. By the end, they're rushing just to get a final product out, right? And it just ended up being a mess.
What year was that? Because that
2013 they started and didn't release it, like the final 1.0, and this is finger quotes here, 1.0 was 2017, I think, if memory holds. So 4 years they took on this thing, and they just did not accomplish much for 4 years. It was like Duke Nukem Forever style.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it, and I was always intrigued by it. In fact, I felt a lot that Cataclysmo was the complete version of Castle Story.
People have been comparing the two since Cataclysmo was announced, yeah. It's got similar roots in the fortification building stuff. It's just way more refined than what Castle Story ended up coming out with.
So are we shifting gears? Because I think if we're shifting gears back to...
I didn't mean, if there's more games you want to talk about in the traditional, go for it.
I got something we need to talk about before we jump ahead here, because I think it's very relevant, and we kind of skipped over this, which is that, as Blxz was talking about, we had the Flash game era of tower defense, right? And I think both a little before that and simultaneously, we had the Blizzard custom games community. In my opinion, StarCraft and then later Warcraft 3, where tower defense went from kind of a thing that you would just occasionally make a map and share with your friends, right? Became a real dedicated community around it. I remember Warcraft 3, it came packaged with a tower defense custom game in the game. Green Circle Tower Defense was the map called. It came with the game, and you could play it single player by yourself. And then multiplayer wise, you'd go on to their server browser and you just see dozens of tower defense games of many different kinds, all community made at any one time.
Yeah, I agree.
Ones which have become actual full products since. There's multiple on Steam right now you can buy that were originally just a custom game that some people made.
There was so much innovation in that era. I wonder if more innovation, or just it was the same thing in a different place, was happening in those Blizzard custom games, which, yeah, it was good that you brought that up. But also on the online era with the Flash title stuff, there was a lot of innovation in both of those.
I think they worked hand in hand. In particular, a classic example I can think of right now, there's a tower defense game, which is, again, a product you can buy on Steam now, GemTD, or Gemcraft. It was originally a Warcraft 3 custom map. It then became a Flash game, several Flash games, actually, I think. And then it became a product you can buy on Steam. There's a Gem Tower Defense game.
They went mainstream sort of in the late 2000s. Plants vs. Zombies, I think, came out in 2009, maybe.
Okay, I'm just going to say it since you mentioned it. Plants vs. Zombies is my favorite pure tower defense game.
I have a note here. Plants vs. Zombies, Tortuga's favorite game.
My 5-year-old just dominates on that thing.
Oh, you knew that?
I got it in here. Yeah.
It is. It's. I think it's just brilliant. Oh man, everything about it. It's cute. It's got a great tower defense cycle. It's very simple. You can play it on the phone. You can play it on the computer. It's so good. Anyway, I love Plants vs. Zombies, and I would say anybody who likes the tower defense genre, it's like a high recommendation for me that you check it out.
Is that just the first one?
Yeah, the second one is only on mobile, I believe. And then all the other titles on PC, I think, are first person. They did some weird transition.
They went downhill very quickly after that.
Don't recommend that. Yeah, but first one probably goes on sale for like $1 or $2 in the Steam sale. And 1,000% worth your time.
I still have not played Plants vs. Zombies.
What?
Again, I was so deep into the Warcraft stuff at the time, I barely even played Flash tower defense games.
Well, and that's really where tower defense games, I know, in terms of becoming really mainstream and like picked up by millions of people.
Flash, yeah.
It was really with the rise of Flash and a lot of the things that developers could do cheaply there, right? And also the fact that mobile, especially Android, really embraced that. But anyway, not to derail things.
No. I mean, yeah, absolutely. Flash is definitely where it really took off. I guess the issue is that when you're kind of deep in the woods of where a lot of, I don't want to say development because that sounds really over the top for what it was, but I was playing a game where there were still new tower defense games were coming out, and then I would see a copy of one being made into a Flash game. It was really surreal at the time. As most people should know by now, MOBAs come from Warcraft 3.
Yeah, definitely got to mention that.
It was such a big thing, they rewrote the EULA just so that now they own anything you make in those custom games, whereas back then you owned whatever you made, and I think that encouraged the development. I think a lot of development and innovation has slowed down since they've made that change. Like, you don't hear of StarCraft 2 custom games anymore, do you?
Oh, yeah, and there are some good ones, but it's not the same.
So we can chalk another loss up to Blizzard there. They've killed another thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, Blizzard's gone not in the right direction, in my opinion, but just to...
It's okay, Roblox will save us. They have lots of tower defense games.
Oh.
But the defense of the ancients, right? That's where all this stuff comes from. Just another tower defense game.
And at the time, it was considered... It split the community because we had more traditionalist tower defense people who were not jumping ship, but MOBA took off. And even in the game, like the server browser became at least 70% MOBA. And there was a couple different ones, but that was Dota's the one that really took off. It was also their I would say was probably the first one that really had a proper gameplay loop, and the others just kind of copied it. I never got into them because I was one of the old fuddy-duddies over here going, no.
No.
Yeah, no, I agree.
It's very different. I mean, Dota's, it's not tower defense. It's really more about RPG, clickfest, whatever. It's a single unit micro, right?
Yeah, I mean, there are units and towers on the map, but they did matter more back in the Warcraft 3 variation, but it quickly became just hero-focused completely. Yeah,
and that's great. I mean, that's a fun thing for them, but I would say it devolved from...
They split off and they left tower defense behind them.
There was another interesting thing, though, and this is... I'm sure very few of the people here have much experience with these, but they are out there, which is that there's EVP tower defense game.
EVP?
Yes, so there's one on Steam right now called Legion's Tower Defense. I think it's Legion's 2, where you... are playing a tower defense game. Now, it's the kind where you use units, which was something we're going to have to discuss a little more here, but you use your traditionally it was actually towers, but this new one on Steam uses units for it, but you actually...
PvP. Yeah, okay, I misheard that.
Player versus player. You're building, your defenses and stuff, but then you actually are the one that sends a wave of enemies to attack the other player's defenses, and they're sending to you.
Oh, right. I remember that.
Did you play Orcs Must Die Unchained?
I did not, but I've heard that it's somewhat similar.
That is the ultimate failure of the PvP model. They had something like you needed like 150 losses before you could even get enough premium currency to buy a tower.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't even start with barricades unlocked, which if you've ever played Orcs Must Die is like a must-have item.
I played the original.
So they were very much pay to win all the way. That was an appalling one, that one. So I was going to ask Tortuga earlier, are there 3 or are there 4 Orcs Must Die games? Like, do you count that last one as even an Orcs Must Die game?
I only own Orcs Must Die 1 and 2, so...
They were the better two.
Let the record reflect. If you're in the middle of a point, let's not do it. But otherwise, I did want to just have a brief segment on the first-person shooter horde mechanic type stuff.
Go ahead.
It's got to be Orcs Must Die. I mean, it's weird that all these games came out at the same time, too. All in 2011, you had this huge... I don't know why there was a surge of these games, but I looked it up, and the original Orcs Must Die and Dungeon Defenders, which, in my opinion, are like the two iconic first-person shooter tower defense games.
When did Sanctum 1 come out?
2011.
Really?
Okay, so again, same year. Oh, jeez.
Oh my gosh. How did that happen? What happened in like 2009 that people started developing these games? I really don't know.
The Dungeon Defenders, Sanctum 1, Orcs Must Die were all 2011.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So just to answer your question, Tortuga, I think that, like 2010-ish is when 4G starts to come out in a lot of cellular networks. So I think you're really starting to see meaningful...
No, these are PC games, though. These aren't mobile games.
No, but I think a lot of the development is cross-pollinating. I think the rise of the smartphone, which is sort of 2008, 2009, leads into an increase in the tower defense genre there. And then I think you see spillover into PC over the following few years.
Plants vs. Zombies was 2009, so I think that kind of...
Oh, there it is.
...brings in... That was the catalyst when it went mainstream.
Well, I mean, that kind of lines up, though. That's all around the same period, right?
And Defense Grid as well was 2009, didn't you say?
2008.
Okay, so there was at least this console game, and then there was Plants vs. Zombies, which I feel like was very successful, not just in my eyes, but others, right?
Yeah, and mobile tower defenses in general were getting popular.
So weird. We had some weird blossoming of this first-person merger of tower defense.
Well, I mean, the iPhone 3GS, which was really the first, I guess the iPhone 3G.
Oh my God, I don't think it's had anything related to that.
I'm just saying the iPhone 3G was released in 2008.
I agree with THD, because mobile games started to become a thing, and a lot of the early ones were basically just Flash games but made for mobile. And a lot of them were tower defense style games because they were cheap to make, right? Bloons, I don't know when the first Bloons was mobile, but I'm sure it didn't take long.
Yeah, I remember the first Bloons. It was a long time ago.
I mean, I'm not trying to kill the conversation, but the Plants vs. Zombies went to mobile in 2009.
Well, yeah. See? Yeah, good. Exactly. Good point.
Wait, was Plants vs. Zombies PC first? I thought it was.
I think it was a Flash game first.
Yeah.
But like I said, a lot of Flash games got cloned to mobile once the mobile app scene started to actually really get off. And it wasn't just the crappy 1 FPS thing on your flip phone that was unplayable.
Okay, so wait, the premise was just that mobile gaming is what started things, that got things going in 2011?
We're just saying that around this time, it was a lot of factors.
I think mobile gaming becoming a thing, because that's like when it first really starts becoming a thing with the 3GS, is what drives a lot of mass adoption of this, because they're cheap, simple, easy games that used to be buried on Flash websites.
Oh, okay, this is tower defense in general, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm speaking of the genre generally, but you guys have mentioned so many games that came out between 2009 and 2011, and part of it's the Plants vs. Zombies effect, but also part of it is that all of a sudden millions of people have a phone that can play Flash-like games. I know iOS didn't support Flash early on, but like they can play Flash-like games that are simple to develop, and so you've got this huge influx of people who are downloading apps, playing games on their phone that are of a higher quality than previously were accessible. And so there's a new market there. And these are games that can easily transfer into that market. A lot of times they're easy time sinks. They're not like deep games. Sorry. The types of games we're talking about anyway.
You're personally attacked here.
Who let this guy on?
So I think the explosion of mobile occurring at the same time as these games are coming out makes sense.
Yeah, okay, it could be.
And in fact, Bloons Tower Defense 3, first one to come to mobile, 2009, iOS App Store.
Okay, yeah.
Big cellular coming for you.
Right on that timeline.
Bloons 3 and Plants vs. Zombie sent it mainstream. 2 years later, we had the explosion.
And I think that's also when you had first-person stuff, right? It's kind of like an evolution.
Well, that's what I was saying. This is only first-person stuff that I'm referring to. I don't know why.
But I think you need the attention before you get the evolution.
Yeah, so people have tried to innovate. They've tried to make something that'll make it multiplayer. They want multiplayer.
Yes.
Orcs Must Die. You and I have played multiplayer, that Tortuga. I think it was 1 or 2.
Co-op, yeah.
Yeah, co-op, same thing. 2 people playing is multi. More than 1 player.
Right, I'm sorry, that's right. We don't acknowledge PvP version never existed, so that's right. The only option was co-op.
No, God, no. But 1 and 2 we've played. We've played all of the Orcs Must Die games together. And Sanctum 1 was a similar sort of a version. And then Dungeon Defenders, I think, is still going strong now. They've got, Dungeon Defenders 2 is out. They've still got DLC coming out in 2023. I think they had more DLC coming out. Like, this is a 12, 13-year-old game.
Again, I don't think that Dungeon Defenders 2 was quite as good. I wouldn't play it now.
Well, they never made a 3.
I would probably play Dungeon Defenders, the original, before I would play the second one. But yeah, it was interesting that those games came out, and I think it's worth mentioning them as tower defense games that you play first person, which is pretty cool. It does have almost a little bit of the MOBA type, because you are essentially your own hero moving around. I think that you can play that as a pure tower defense, and it's really up to the player whether or not they want to invest more of their points and their research technology into better towers or better player interactions.
What about X-Morph? Did any of you guys play that one? It was on the Xbox and the PC.
I did not.
No.
Do you want to talk a little about it though?
Yeah, sure, I can talk about it. I won't spend too much time. But X-Morph was basically you were an alien attacking Earth, effectively. So you landed down, you were like fully zerging and spreading your gooey shit all over the Earth.
Ugh.
And the military was coming in with a series of incompetent generals who would just telegraph their attacks down straight lines or coming in from different directions. But it was a lot more, it was almost in the Defense Grid 1 style. So you actually built your own maze a lot of the time. You had a thing, an X-Morph, that would fly around like a plane. So it was actually really good on things like on console with your dual stick. You'd fly around with that thing shooting, but at the same time you'd drop down towers and try and funnel them into like a maze grid so that you'd have more time to wipe everyone out before they got to your terraforming core. And sort of Defense Grid 1-esque while trying, it was multiplayer as well, so they were bringing in not multiplayer, it was co-op.
You can call it.
More than 1 player optional. You could have that sort of co-op where they upped the difficulty, a bit like how Diablo makes the enemies stronger.
This is a 2017 release, is that correct? I mean, I just looked it up,
yeah,
but it looks good.
It's a fantastic game. If I haven't got it, what's that thing called? Game Pass. I think it's on Game Pass. you could pick it up on that if you're really keen. But I'm not an Xbox player.
And it's got a Steam release now too, so that's nice.
Yeah, that's how I played it on Steam. It's a bloody fantastic game.
Okay, cool. Well, add it to my wish list. I think it's time for us to start talking about the modern stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry I just want to throw my punch first. I think that it all happened with They Are Billions, but let me know if you think that there was something else before that. But in my opinion, They Are Billions just came and it just took the scene by storm. It reinvigorated a lot of the stuff that we're seeing.
Well, I've got They Are Billions as an actual subgenre in the thing. I think it's defined and innovated its own. It's sort of, I call it the, like when I was describing it to a friend the other week, I call it the Dark Souls of tower defense, in that it sort of embraces, a lot of the other games are about winning, whereas I've found the early part of They Are Billions, like when you first play your first couple of games, they embrace a failure first style of play, I think. So arguably the player is expected to fail the first couple of times, and you only really win, thrive and survive and everything once you've got a bit of experience under it and really get up there. Like balloons, you're expected to pass. Obviously you fail at the end, but there's 40, 50, 60 rounds you win. Whereas They Are Billions, I think, really has gone for that failure first style. Your opinion on that, or?
Well, let's let weigh in, because first of all, I agree with everything you said. I actually really like this thing you said about the Dark Souls and this failure first, because it is extremely brutal. You can't really recover from an early failure. But yeah, let me pass the floor over to Leth. I assume you played They Are Billions. I assume you played it a ton.
I've played a decent amount of it. So I originally played it when it first came out, and I kind of bounced off of it because I struggled with it, because it is difficult. Since then, I have a friend who is another content creator who really got into They Are Billions, and he would do full streams of playing through the campaign on the hardest difficulty. And so I revisited it to try and play on that difficulty. I actually think that feels what the game's designed for, because that is when it is truly at its most. You feel the omnipresent threat of the zombies in that game. But, and this comes back to what Blxz said about how that challenge where it almost expects you to be defeated and have to try again, right? On the campaign, when you're playing on the harder difficulties, you're going to die a lot. You need to be the kind of person that's willing to quick save and quick load a whole bunch of times, because if you even pull one enemy towards your defenses at a bad time, like just a single enemy, that can cascade into you just lose. So it becomes like, oh, well, I'm going to try and pull this zombie 10 feet away this time. And there's parts of that I don't actually like in hindsight, because a lot of tower defense games are pretty open to the player coming up with their own solutions to a problem, right? There might be a certain kind of enemy that your defenses aren't optimal against, but because you're so good at defending against these other things, it's okay if you take a hit here or something like that, right? But with They Are Billions, it demands perfection of you at all times. There is an optimal, more or less optimal way to play through, especially with the campaign, where there's a giant tech tree in that. Oh, there's so many traps. Like, oh, I'm getting ballista towers. You should get ballista towers as soon as possible, right? You could get them later. Don't get them now. It's a waste, because the early missions, you're not going to need it. And instead, they're like, oh, you got to get to the next tech tree, the next part of the tech tree where you get your arc tower, your Tesla towers and stuff like that. Because of that, I think the game's really hard to get into the first time for a lot of people. And that's what makes it so difficult, because there is more or less an optimal way to play through it. And until you figure that out, the game's just going to kick you in the teeth over and over again.
Bit like a puzzle game or something.
Yeah, very puzzly.
I would share a slightly different perspective. My own was that I played on normal difficulty, and I still felt the game was very reasonably challenging. I still failed missions. Again, this has a pretty brutal mechanic. I mean, maybe we should just take a step back and explain what They Are Billions is for anybody who, God forbid, hasn't played this game. It's really good, though. It's half city builder, half tower defense, and it does have a wave mechanic where you have so much time to build up. It's real time, so it's running, and you know when the next zombie attack is going to come. You have to build up a lot of city-type stuff, because there is a housing, there's residential. I mean, you have to build up enough people, and that is not a small part of the game mechanic. A lot of it really comes down to almost a Caesar or Pharaoh-like figuring out a way to cram in the most efficient layout for your buildings. And then you also need to maximize your resource gain. All these things are kind of coupled together because you have limited grass space, and that grass can be used for farms, or it could be a nice defensive place to put housing. And there's a lot of little building trade-offs in this, where the layout of your base, although it's not going to be, hopefully not, I mean, probably game over if the zombies actually get to that point, but the layout of your base is very important from like a Caesar building, it's like city building perspective.
Just to cut in here, the reason for the game over if they get in, is that because the zombies, they bite the people living in the houses and it like cascades from there? Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. So once one building is attacked by a zombie, there's two. Every building has 2 hit points. Their hit points are broken into 2 categories. The first sliver of it, I mean, depends on the building, but most non-defense based buildings only have a very little amount of hit points that they can suffer before they shut down, and the residents, whatever workers are inside, are turned into zombies, which gives you this cascading effect where things just snowball out of control. And God forbid, if you stack your residents, your housing all together, which is what most people do, they get one building and the houses have like no hit points before they break. So it's game over basically. It's beautiful when it happens, but you know, in the moment you probably don't think so because you're about to lose.
And it's very unforgiving. It's quick. When the end comes, you will not have time to react to it.
Yeah, but actually, so then there are ways you can kind of be on medium difficult or normal difficulty rather than the highest ones. I actually started to build in sub-segments of walls to prevent that cascade effect, or at least to buy myself some time to correct if I had a failure. It wasn't catastrophic, it was just nearly catastrophic. That's really rewarding when the game offers that. But I don't know if you can do that at the higher difficulty levels.
You can.
Can I ask, because I have not played this, but I feel like tower defense games are susceptible to this. And I think where you're going, Tortuga, is similar to this. Is this one of those games where like you've lost and you don't know it yet? Because I think that's one of the struggles to me with some tower defense games, is if you've already lost, but you're not going to find out for another 2 hours. You spend all this time, but the critical mistake you made was hours ago. I know that's one of those things that can get folks really frustrated with these types of games. It's just that like sometimes it's not communicated to you. Like there's a path you have to follow. You didn't. It's too late. You can't course correct.
I think if you're doing I don't know what you call it, the kind of sandbox mode where you're just trying to last as long as possible, your endless mode, not so much. I don't think that's as much of a problem. The problem comes into the campaign because it has a tech tree where you pick your techs between missions and you get your points from doing missions. And there's certain levels where if you didn't grab certain techs, it might be beatable, but you're going to have such a painful experience with that level that you're probably either going to give up or you're going to have to reload a save many missions ago to redo your tech choices.
Sorry to jump in, but can you remind me, can you change difficulty midway through the campaign?
You can, but again, I think even on normal difficulty, there's certain missions. If you don't have farms by certain levels, you're just not going to have enough food.
You might be able to lock yourself out. Okay.
Yeah, you can basically soft lock yourself on a few missions. Like, again, Tesla Towers are one of the most key defensive structures in the game because they're an AoE attack. And there's certain levels where the waves they send at you are just nothing but a massive horde of the weakest zombie type, where it's just so many that no amount of walls is going to hold them back. You have to kill them to stop them. And Tesla Tower is pretty much the only way you're going to survive that, because it's the only thing that's going to do enough AoE to clear them by that point in the game. So if you didn't grab Tesla Towers and you do that level, you're going to have to go back a level and hope that you can grab the tech, because otherwise you're stuck.
And you kind of mentioned now, but that is the second part of the game. Besides the city building, there's the actual tower defense. Mm-hmm. And this is a game which relies heavily on units. So you can think of one of your towers as your units. And for that, I have to say, it does involve, or it can involve, if you want to be like really perfect about it, you have to micro your units pretty efficiently.
Oh, big time. Yeah.
So it does have a pause button, so there's not like it doesn't need to be played in a click fast split second reaction. As long as you can hit spacebar, then you can plan out what you want to do and all that. But it does require pretty intense micro to be played at the harder difficulty levels. And if you want to try to micro through a wave that you might just lose otherwise, it might be possible to do if you're willing to commit to that kind of experience, pause, move unit, fire one arrow, move back. You can actually play it that way and play it much more efficient, but I don't play it that way. So yeah, the tower defense aspect is also based on units. So this is the muddling of the genre back to real-time strategy, where you have units that you can put in towers, but then you also have towers themselves, like the Tesla tower. That's pretty much, you can't play the game without that one, I would say.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, what others? One they have Ballista.
I forget what you call it, but it has like a Gatling gun in it.
Yeah, the Executor or something like that. Executioner.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so it's mostly about walls, I think. It's mostly about wall placement and efficiently putting either units or towers behind it. And there's traps as well. Bloody fun game, though. I just love it. It's brutal, and it's one of the very few games I will actually play in a mode where you just survive like 80 days. It's not endless mode, but you get a random custom map, and it's no longer the campaign. I love the campaign. I would recommend that first, but then if you want to play more afterwards, you can go to these one-off basically scenarios and skirmishes, I guess, and just play it that way, which is still a lot of fun to me. Does anybody else want to talk about more on They Are Billions? Sorry that I talked so much about it, but it's just...
I think it's an important game to discuss a lot of, because it is, as has been mentioned, a lot of games have come since, and I think...
Practically defined a subgenre.
Yeah.
Well, Zed, what maybe bring you back in, where does it go from there? They Are Billions picks up, and I mean, where does the genre or subgenre go from there?
The actual subgenre itself doesn't really... I don't think there's been a huge amount of innovation in the They Are Billions-esque section. You've got Diplomacy's not an option.
Yes.
2 or 3 years up, maybe 2022, so 3 years after They Are Billions initially released. It's a similar sort of a concept. It's different in some ways, but graphically almost a skin of They Are Billions in some ways. I haven't played much of Diplomacy's not an option, so I really don't want to comment too much on that one. But visually, I found them to be a superficial improvement. I think the real innovation is when people change genres, and whether it's changing back. So I go back to like Cataclysmo in 2024, which is the newest one, the hot one that everyone's sort of talking about at the moment, is just like a reskinned castle story. But I think it's the new innovations. You've done the They Are Billions, you're now jumping over something a bit different where you're building your walls again more carefully. It's beauty building in a sense.
We really should say that this is Lego style wall construction. It's not place a wall, it's place a brick in the wall and then build up the wall brick by brick. Now, the bricks are like 2 meters by 1 meter, so it's not like you're building, tiny bricks, but it is brick by brick. How you get to customize how you want your wall, how tall it is, where you want your, whatever those things are that you hide behind as the archers, wherever you want those things to go.
Granulations, Merlons.
Thank you.
The issue I find with Cataclysmo, and I haven't played it either, I've only watched YouTube videos of this one, so correct me if I'm wrong, feel free to jump in, but I think there's a fundamental mismatch between the kind of people who are going to spend an hour anally building up these beautiful defense segments and then have them destroyed and stuff like that. The main issue is I think the perfect Sim City, the people who build the perfect Sim City and then drop a big meteor on top of it are only going to be a subset of your general city building genre. People building these nice, beautiful, defensive, perfect walls, only to have them come in and just be destroyed, I think is one issue. The second main issue, I think you can spend 40 minutes plus obsessing over your perfect wall or a great oxygen harvesting setup or some kind of thing that you do, and the whole mission might only be that long. So you're just continuously repeating the same thing over and over again with a lot of detail put in. I really think Cataclysmo is going to suffer from burnout very quickly. Have you guys played it? Can you correct that?
Let the ones you go first in this, and then I'll...
You and I have played a similar amount. I think I might be only like one mission ahead of you based on achievements. So I think we both played pretty far into the campaign of it. The thing about the walls, when I first picked it up, I thought I was going to spend a lot of time making my walls look nice in that game, but no. My walls always look about the same, and they're always quite ugly, because the way you build your walls is way less about the aesthetics of it, and more about the actual structural integrity of the wall. Because...
Yeah, true.
When an enemy attacks a wall in, say, Stronghold 1, they just start wailing on the wall, and then the wall chips its way down from the top to the bottom, and eventually the wall hits the bottom, and the guy who's standing on that wall segment is now just on the ground getting hit. Cataclysmo, those little individual blocks all have health bars. So let's say you took a bunch of your Lego blocks and you just stacked them up straight. Just a straight wall. No interlacing between them, just straight wall. You break the bottom block, what happens? The entire thing collapses. That's what happens in Cataclysmo. If you just build a column of bricks and the enemies attack it, that wall is just going to... You might as well not have even have built it, because it's just going to collapse. You actually have to stagger your bricks. You need to have layers of it. Later on, there's things like rain, which will impact your troops. So you have to have roofs to shelter your troops. You need to give them crenellations or windows. Windows later become the only thing you build to give your troops more range. And you're trying to do that while also expanding your economy. And you're on a very tight timer for the mission. I never feel like I have enough time to get all the defenses up that I need, especially because the enemies will come from one direction, wave 1. Wave 2, they're coming from at least 2 directions, and then wave 3, they're coming from 3 or more. Sometimes there's even a boss enemy. And you're just in a panic to get your defenses up. Also, you have a very limited number of troops. The game really restricts your force size for your defenders. So you have to focus on the walls, because the walls are there to buy you as much time as possible for your very small number of troops to kill as much as you can. And almost always, your initial defense... Even if you build it perfectly, especially on the later missions, so many enemies attack and you don't have enough troops for everything, you're probably going to lose a wall somewhere. So you can't just have the one wall. You actually need fallback positions. And you'll have to do like running retreats where half your guys are pulling off the wall while you've still got a few guys up there defending it, so that you can get ready for the second line of defense. And I really enjoy that because I like meticulously designing a defense where, again, it's not about looks. It's just about planning out exactly how I'm going to defend against something. Because the game tells you basically what's going to attack and from where. It'll give you a rough amount of numbers, but it won't be exact. It'll say, like, there'll be hundreds of this enemy. That's the kind of waves you're dealing with every time. And it gets to the point, because you're so resource-starved, that your walls... You're not going to have crenellations along the entire wall. Are you kidding me? That's a waste of stone. No, you're going to have a crenellation in like one spot, then a flag to give damage boost to your archer, and then a little ways later, you're going to have another crenellation. You're going to space it out, and it's going to look hideous. Because the type of person that's going to play this game, where you're spending 40 minutes designing a wall, is also probably going to be the kind of person who's going to be like, that's a waste of resources. Why would I do that? That's inefficient.
Yeah, I think they even know that, since they just added, this is only like a month after their early access release. They've added now like a sandbox mode where you can just build up and then have a wave launched against you.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, at least, you can make it a little bit more beautiful. But yeah, I can't say that there's much I would disagree with about what you've said. It's a strange game. I'm really enjoying it, but I keep thinking, I keep wondering why I'm enjoying it, because it does have a lot of things which, in theory, should be frustrating. And I think that you've talked about a lot of them. You build up your walls, but you can't make them beautiful. And it doesn't feel like actually you have too much, despite this system, which is supposed to, I mean, the whole point of building up brick by brick should be that you can make whatever your mind can envision, you know, but in the end, it almost might as well be a standard template, because you just copy and paste the same thing, which is a little disappointing. I mean, you got to work around corners and stuff, and the terrain can impact, the rise and fall of the terrain will impact your decision slightly, or it'll just mean that you put in bricks, you fill it all in, and then you start with your basic template. Part of the mechanic is the higher the wall is, the taller it is a completely counter to real logic. But anyway, the higher the wall is, the more hit points the bottom stones have. So you're building up really tall towers. Even if you don't need them, you just keep building them up and up and up, so that the bottom stones, which are the ones that will be attacked, have higher hit points. And that's also some of the reasons why, I mean, I put windows at the top of my tower, which cannot be accessed.
Yeah.
Just because, I mean, this is actually true with cremulations. Cremulations will act as one tier upgrade on the wall they're sitting on top of. So you can just throw cremulations just to upgrade the wall, and it just doesn't look good. It's just, for a game which has so much potential for that customizable wall building, it really doesn't allow you to utilize it. Leth, have you played the skirmish mode?
So no, actually, I have not done skirmish mode yet.
Yeah, so it gives you 4 days. I've found that you have a little bit more liberty to design your walls. I mean, you can have a little more fun with it, but it's only one more day. We're not talking about like a whole lot of work. Another fault that I have with the game, again, I want to say that this game is probably like an 8 or an 8.5 out of 10 for me. I really like it.
Yeah.
But I will say that the game doesn't seem to know exactly what it is yet. That's my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So it has this wall building structure, and sometimes in the missions, they'll restrict the number of parts, which like you have a brick which is 2 by 1, so it's 2 wide, 1 tall. Then you have one which is 1 by 2. You have 1 by 3. You have all these different parts. And in some missions, in the normal economy-based mode is each one of those will just have a different wood or stone cost, mostly stone. But in some missions, they just give you a fixed number of those, and I loathe those missions. I really don't like that they constrain you to this. I don't know, I just feel it's like overly constrained that our creativity, maybe they had an idea about what we're supposed to build. They gave us the parts for that. And then they just want us to duplicate it. That's not as satisfying for me as like a tower defense with this customization. Allow me to build whatever solution I come up with, which maybe has balancing challenges for the developers, but it feels better from a player standpoint. That's another thing. So there's also something to mention about the game is pretty creative. So again, going back to this defense grid where they had really good voice acting, I think that the voice acting in this and the story development is pretty cool. They invested a ton of time into it, I think you can tell. That a lot of the creative aspects of this game were really, it's a work of passion rather than just boilerplate on your, what are you going to do in this mission, So those are my comments about it.
The only thing I'm trying to figure out, so game has both what we would call in an RTS game, all of you should be familiar with these, no build missions, where game goes, instead of building up your base like normal, here's a couple units, just use them.
Yeah.
They Are Billions has a really bad version of that.
Yeah, it's true.
But almost every RTS game has this, and I have a friend who pretty much every time he plays an RTS game, he'll go, why is there a no build mission? Because, he hates them. So there's no build style missions in Cataclysmo, but there's also the tower defense missions, and both of those restrict your parts. Is it both of them that you dislike, or is one more acceptable than the other for you?
Well, the tower defense ones are like kind of okay. I don't like them as much. I feel resistant to them when I'm playing them. I'm still having an okay time, but if the game was only based on that, it would probably be only like a 6 out of 10. So I know that my enjoyment is less when they give me a fixed number of parts. Even if I end up not using all of them, I don't like the idea of it.
I kind of get it. I found the tower defense ones I didn't mind as much, just because, I mean, to be honest, they give you way more parts than you need for those, so I don't feel as bad about it. But there's like, not to spoil things, but there's a sort of boss fight you have to do on one of the campaign missions, and they give you limited parts for that one.
Wait, is that the Sirena one?
Yes. I did not like that mission.
Yeah, okay. That was like 0 economy, right?
Yeah, no economy at all. You had a limited number of troops and a limited number of parts. And also, they give you like pre-built spots around the map, which the game often does, to like encourage you to build your defenses there. Those pre-built spots are actually a trap because they're within a perfect AoE for the boss enemy to destroy them. Whereas if you just built your tower like 5 feet backwards, it would be infinitely safer.
Yeah, I know what you're saying now. Okay, yeah.
The game's not nice.
I think that's also another way where the game, it really feels like it's it's confused about what it's trying to do, because that mission really highlights the way they want you to use your parts, your puzzle pieces, for interacting with the map to build bridges, to get to new places on the map where you haven't got to before, which is just, it's like, I don't really enjoy building stairs and all that. It takes a little too much time. I wish R was rotate instead of right click, and right click could be like go away.
Oh, yeah. Agreed.
Yeah, there's some UI stuff that makes the building like you remember on that same mission, you have to build to get the second journal entry or whatever. You have to build this winding wooden path over and under and around, and it's probably like 50 pieces to get to this other thing, and that's all you're doing is just puzzle building. That to me is not what the game excels at, and I don't like that part of it. So that's just maybe another grievance. You don't have to do it too much, but like any of the bridge building stuff that they really like to lean into, it's not something that I'm a fan of.
And I want to make it clear for people who are listening to this, Tortuga and I both have negative feelings about the game, but again, I would think we both would say we both enjoy it. It just feels like it's got some issues as a new release, right?
It's crazy how much I really keep playing it, which must mean it's a good game. I mean, I wouldn't spend time playing it if I didn't really enjoy it. Can we switch gears just maybe a little? We're probably about to wrap up, but I just want to say diplomacy is not an option. I really thought that game was the next They Are Billions. I really liked it, and I think I do like the kind of simpler environment. It's like a sequel to They Are Billions. So I think that anybody who plays They Are Billions and doesn't know where to go from there, there's also another game, what was it called? Age of Darkness, I think, which was, I think, just a ripoff of They Are Billions, but
I wouldn't go that far. I would say it takes inspiration from, but and I want to hear you talk about diplomacy is not an option about this, because I've heard mixed things about that as well. But Age of Darkness, it's got pretty mixed reviews since it came out. I don't think it's really gotten its legs. I don't know if it ever will. That game has been kind of troubled.
Well, my thoughts on diplomacy are not an option, or is not an option, is I enjoy the campaign. It's kind of interesting the way they've done it. They've made it so it's very branching, but not very deep. I think, I haven't played through the final campaign yet, but just based on the release notes, I played a lot of the game, the only thing they offered was 2 missions, which was actually 4 missions, because even the first 2 missions are branching path. Everything you do in that game is branching path. So you got to choose whether or not you want to defend the rebels or the king. It's this whole thing, and then even that splits into like another faction choice later.
Is diplomacy an option at any point?
It is not. In fact, the game has kind of a clever. They think, at least, I think so too. But hopefully, I'm not sure if it's for everyone. They have a pretty subtle humor, where even one of the game options that you can choose is diplomacy, and then your options are like no, not possible, or is not an option. And it's pretty clever. You can toggle between those 3. The story itself is not very good. I think that one problem with the campaign is the intro to the missions are probably like 10 minutes long. It's insane. And it's not that it needs to be. It's probably like 20 seconds of writing. But the way the 3D engine or whatever that they use to make it is just, it takes so long for a person to say one line. It's awful. But the actual campaign stories are really good because I like the structure. I'm just not a big fan of like the endless mode in these kind of games. Even though that's a lot of tower defense. I like tower defense games where you survive to wave number, and that's when you win. Where the endless is like, it's all about losing. I don't like to lose, so I don't like playing it that way.
Do you like They Are Billions?
They Are Billions. You can win. You can win. With diplomacy is not an option. I think I played a lot of the scenarios, and they had a lot of like challenge mode stuff, and I enjoy the game enough because I think that they've honed down the They Are Billions model into needing a lot less of the city building and being able to focus more on the resource collection and the wall building. So to me, that was a positive. Yeah, I think it's mostly probably because it's not as stressful. I think that's why I like diplomacy is not an option, just because of that. It's a good game. I guess I really don't know how to explain why. And we'll see what the version 1.0 release, which has just happened, what it brings, what the campaign looks like. For anybody who enjoys There Are Billions, I really think it's worth picking up. It'll be like an extension of that game in kind of a different environment and maybe slightly less stressful.
Yeah, I mean, really my only exposure to it was actually from your own coverage of it. I don't know anyone that's played it.
Really? That's crazy.
Terrible name for a game. Like, I think they dropped the ball there.
It is. Yeah. I mean, I don't even know what to call it. Even in chat conversations with us, I'm like, do I call it Diplo? Do I call it Dinoa or whatever?
You've mentioned it on a lot of podcasts, though, Tortuga. It's come up multiple times.
That's because I played so much of There Are Billions, rightfully so, right? It's a great game. But at some point, that's a very depressing environment. And, I guess I like the fact that diplomacy is a lot less. It's like, it's green and colorful. I've covered everything that I want to talk about. I'm very happy with all the coverage to the games I've given. Oh, by the way, this is another one that came up for me. AI War. Would you consider AI War?
Oh, jeez.
Well, it really, most of the game mode there is you trigger, you probe a little bit further and then you trigger a response and then you just huddle. You turtle.
My sole experience with that game is the time that you dragged me in with our friend Lightning Dragon. and I think someone else.
Oh, yeah.
And the entire session was you just trying to teach me how to play, because that is an extremely difficult game to get into, especially because you don't have a lot of time to learn how to play before you're in trouble.
It's a neat concept, but let's just call it not a tower defense and not cover it. But yeah, okay. Then that probably is every game that I thought about covering here. Oh, Axon TD, which recently came up, is another.
Yeah, I wanted to hear about that because you were talking about that earlier.
To me, it's the next. It's got an interesting thing where you can make your own maze, which is not uncommon. That's been done, but there's also the option to part of the map which starts disconnected, and you're given tiles that you can add, and you can add them to connect new segments, and then block the original paths to create new map essentially. Thought that was pretty neat. I haven't seen that before. It's probably been done, but again, it's the first time I've seen it. And even some of those had like rotators, so you can choose which 90-degree permutation you wanted. It's neat. Otherwise, I would say it just strikes me a lot like one of those. I can't even remember. Defense Grid: The Awakening. Were you building your towers on the travel path?
You were later on. You built your own maze on the sort of the second half of the game.
Yeah, so it's like that. You can build on the map. In fact, it's the way you're supposed to do it is by using your towers to...
I think they were one of the first to actually create that sort of build your own maze. I think so. 2008, they were pretty early on the scene.
Well, as far as released games, because in custom like maps and stuff, mazing is old, but
oh yeah, true.
Not many like full products had it.
Well, let me just say, Blxz, any other tower defense stuff you'd like to talk about?
I think we've covered pretty much all of it. You could talk about, your Rift Breakers, your Thronefall, all the sort of different little games out there. You could talk about the sequels and how they've evolved, but ultimately, I think...
Why don't you just give like a quick thumbs up, thumbs down for those games, maybe if you recommend it or not, just so people who are listening, they might, if it's worth for them to check it out.
Don't actually have enough experience in them all to really give a... Like, I want to know a game. I'm the kind of person, like, I watch YouTube channels like review after 100 hours kind of thing, rather than someone reviewing after 20 minutes in the game. So... I can't give a thumbs up or a thumbs down because my reputation will rest on that. So, such that it is.
Reputation? What reputation?
Yeah, what reputation? Yeah. of abandoning a YouTube channel? Yeah.
Hey, infamous, not famous. But
yeah.
I'll pass on giving a thumbs up or thumbs down. But they are out there. There's a whole host of incredible games. We've touched on 10, 15% of the genre. And if anyone's into tower defense or they're curious, branch out, explore a bit. There are a huge number of games out there that offer anything you might want.
TD curious.
Yeah, look, if you are TD curious, then now is your time. The future is bright, I reckon, with tower defense.
I do have two games. I'll just very briefly mention them because I can give one a thumbs up and one a thumbs down. Despite them, they're like opposite sides of a coin. They're two modern tower defense games. There are still many more coming out. One we have is Rogue Tower. It's very simple graphically game. It was supposed to be a roguelike tower defense game in the sense that your towers you get come from a deck. You can build your deck. So sometimes you're going to get the tower you need, sometimes you're not. But simple premise.
Oh, I've seen this.
However, I do not recommend it to most people. And here's why. It's the case of a game that came out. It was perfectly serviceable at launch. Developer was very active though, and they over-tweaked it. They constantly were nerfing things, buffing things, adding new units, buffing, nerfing those units, and if players were doing a certain strategy a lot, I gotta nerf that to the ground. Constantly do that, and the game's at a point right now where I think most of the most active players have more or less given up on it. And he even stopped updating it sometime last year, but it's in a much worse place now than I feel it was when it first came out.
That's a bummer.
On the other hand, there's another game, Tower Tactics Liberation. Fairly simple game where you're going to get random towers and you're going to build decks. So it's another roguelike type tower defense game. It's the kind where there's a preset maze on the map, so you have to place your towers along the outside of the maze route. That's still in active development. But my experience with that one has been that it's the opposite, where I think everything he's added has been great. And I think every new update, the game's actually better than it was before. And that's one I can safely recommend to most people. If you're interested in that kind of rogue-like tower defense merger. I think it's one of the better ones. There's a similar one. It's called Ember something. I can't remember what it is, but it's a similar style one, but I haven't played that one, so I can't comment on that one. But yeah, roguelike tower defenses, that's another subgenre that's really taken off these last couple years.
Yeah, I don't think I've played any of those. I did see the Rogue Tower one, but sad to hear about the way that one's gone.
Yeah, I put a lot of hours into it too. I'm not happy.
Okay, well, I think we're probably at the verge of wrapping here. So talked about a lot of games and everything, a lot of tower defense stuff. For people who are new to this, what would be maybe your one game that you'd recommend them start with? For some reason they're living under a rock and they just, what? Tower defense is a genre? I have my own thoughts on it. Maybe one or two, whatever. Just any kind of recommendations for how people get started. And then...
Frostpunk 2.
Yeah, so let's just do that. Zed, what do you think?
Look, I think if you are starting on tower defense, you need to start go purity. Start from the basics. Go your Defense Grid 1, Defense Grid Awakening, I think it's called. Maybe Orcs Must Die if you like that sort of older 3D style. But something like Bloons, I think 5 and 6 are pretty good. And Plants vs. Zombies, if you haven't played that, from 15 years ago.
My joke answer is to play Arknights, which is the gotcha game tower defense.
I'm not familiar with that one.
Get all of our listeners to spend all their money on their towers, because they're all girls, of course. Oh. It's actually a very good tower defense game, but unfortunately it is a gotcha game, so be careful with that, especially if you have gambling problems. The other thing, the game I'd really recommend, though, for people would be probably one of the Gemcraft games, which there's a couple of them, I think, now, but you can get them on Steam. They're very straightforward and old tower defense games. They have amazing elements, and they're very easy to get into, and they're simple, so they're a safe recommendation for me.
I guess I'll just echo Blxz said, two of his. I would say Bloons TD6. I have that, and I even play it for my kids sometimes. It's a simple enough game that even those numbskulls can understand it and they enjoy it. So if they can get started in it, maybe anybody else could. And then I would definitely say Plants vs. Zombies, man. That's just so iconic to me. And I think I've gone back and played it. I don't feel like the gameplay for that it ages well, is what I would say. So I don't think the years have hurt it at all.
One of your favorite games to use for footage when you're doing an announcement for the channel.
Yeah, because I love playing it. Tishy, do you have any, I don't know, you haven't played much of it, but just in case you have something to add.
Yeah, I mean, I know this is maybe a little tired because it's older, but maybe the remasters of Stronghold, I still think they hold up well.
That's a good, yeah.
They're an enjoyable time. They're very approachable. It's not something that's, overwhelming. They're just good fun. The campaign's super lighthearted if you want to play that. It's a good time.
I was expecting you to suggest Frostpunk.
Yeah, he said Frostpunk too. You didn't hear him?
No.
That was pretty clever. Okay, last thing.
Call of Duty Zombies. That's a tower defense game, right? You gotta build, different things to take out the zombies in masses, right?
In a way it is, and I hate that that's true, but...
Wait, what game was it?
Call of Duty Zombies.
Oh, yeah.
I almost mentioned it when you guys were talking earlier about, wave defense, and I was kind of like, well...
It is. The last thing I wanted to at least say myself, and I want to give you guys a chance to say, is your favorite tower defense-like game of all time, if you dare even say it. For me, I'm going to go ahead and say There Are Billions is probably, in my opinion, the best tower defense game, most innovative and everything. I think it's re-inspired. So to me, that's going to be my answer.
For me, it's a Warcraft 3 custom game, which is still my favorite one of all time, which is what we call Winter Mall.
Zed, I hear you typing.
Yeah, look, I have to run right now, but I will say best tower defense game out there, Defense Grid 1, The Awakening. It is the true classic. It's perfection. Everything else is trying to be it.
Perfect. Well, I think that's also the wrap for our episode. So thanks a lot for joining, Leth. And THG, thanks for staying up late enough to basically coordinate with us and talk with us and interject your TD thoughts.
Before we let everybody go, Leth, do you have anything you want to plug?
Anything I want to plug? No, I've got nothing. I am a ghost.
Ooh, scary.
I know.
Do you want to plug your friend's channel?
Yeah. A guy who plays a lot of these kind of games as well. Goes by Commissar Merrick on Twitch. He also has a small YouTube channel that he uploads his videos to. Covers a lot of games similar to the ones we discussed tonight.
That was close. I thought you were going to be like, my friend Tortuga Power.
Everyone knows that. Everyone knows the old Torty P. Come on.
Well, again, thanks for coming on, Leth.
Happy to be here.
Tishy, thanks for staying up this late for all this.
Yeah, I had a good time. Even though I'm not the biggest tower defense aficionado, I enjoyed the discussion. And
then that is going to be a wrap for us. That's enough tower defense talk for now. Thanks for everyone for listening, and until the next episode, we're out.
To our podcast tonight, Single Malt Strategy, where we take flight with Tortuga Power and Sprinkle Gleam of two. Grab your favorite drink, 'cause we got the few. Building my empire, defending it all night. Waves of 'em coming, but my tactics are tight.